kind of touched upon this. What should Texas do in regard to the Connecticut shootings? What do you think of people calling for more gun control?
This issue is one that obviously has broken everyone's heart, and rightfully so. But as you go back and you look at the history of this country, and you go back to mass killings that we have had in this country, and the frequency of them, and what have you, and as it's very raw upon our minds and on our nervous systems, and as we go through and we think about just the brutality of this and the senselessness of it, and all of that is a normal thing to do. But as we do think through and cogitate about how do we address this, where are the where was the failings in the system, and we could probably spend the rest of the evening here discussing that, but for brevity's sake, obviously the mental health side of this. This was a young man who, it appears, and I don't want to do what I criticize people about, saying things without all the facts in. But it appears that this was a young man who was very disturbed, and so the mental health side of how we deal with this issue. The other side of that is there a way that we can make our schools safer? And I will suggest to you that these members of the legislature will go through a process, Tom, over the course of the next 140 days when the session starts, discussing how can we make our children safer in their schools, and what are the procedures that can be put in place, and allow the local school districts to make that. I think all of you can share with you. I'm aware of a school district just over the course of the last few days that has decided that they want to allow either their teachers or their administrators or those who would be given the authority to be a security force to have access to weapons in their school, and that. I have said many times, and Texas, I think, does a fairly good job of when you apply for a concealed handgun license in the state of Texas, you go through a process, and it's not a simple process. It's a background check, it's the proper training, it's the registration, and appropriately making sure that the individuals who, as best we can, to make sure that they're responsible, well-trained, and that's, again, I'm not going to get into other states and how they do it and whether they make it easier or what have you. That's for those states to decide. And one of the things that I hope we don't see from our federal government is this knee-jerk reaction from Washington, D.C. when there is an event that occurs that they come in and think they know the answer.
Amen.
Let me just leave you with this. I mean, I'm not shy about my position on the Second Amendment, what it means. I think it is pretty straightforward. And in the state of Texas, with our concealed handgun license, if you go through the process and you have been duly backgrounded and trained, and you are a concealed handgun license carrying individual, you should be able to carry your handgun anywhere in this state. Private property, if they decide they don't want you, then that's fine. Private property is there, but the fact is, from a public standpoint, you should be able to carry it.
Next question. Many individuals support the Texas Budget Compact. This is a two-part question. Will you eliminate tax incentive programs? And will you enact truth in budgeting protections?
Let me look at that. I think you said tax incentive programs. So, and I don't know where this came from. I'm going to expand out a little bit here. Tax incentive programs I would suggest we're talking about like the Enterprise Fund, the Emerging Technology Fund. I'm a big fan of those, and let me tell you why I'm a big fan of those. Is because we got to compete. I'm in California trying to get a $1.4 billion a year company to move to the state of Texas, and I think that it makes sense for us to be able, with the legislative oversight, with the lieutenant governor and the speaker and the appropriate people taking a look at this. So we were actually having this conversation within this last week with a group, the Texas Conservative Coalition came in. We were visiting about how, I mean, one of the things they want to do is reduce the margins tax. So let me just see a show of hands here. How many of you think reducing the margins tax would be a good thing in this state? Yeah, I'm surprised there's not more hands. Well, I'm just, you know, stay with me here. So there would be an argument that said that is a type of corporate incentive. And the reason they say we want to lower the tax burden here is so businesses will come to our state. I like to have as many tools on the table as we can. I happen to think that when you look at, I think we have expended $400 million over the course of the enterprise fund's life. It came into account over 3, I think. And so nearly 10 years. So let's say an average of $40 million a year that we use to lure these businesses from other states or had someone expand in the state. $16 billion worth of capital can be directly attributed to that program, and 56,000 jobs directly attributed to that. So under any matrix that you would use, if you were, you know, whatever you would want to use as your matrix for the enterprise fund, I suggest that the return on that investment is incredibly broad and powerful. So, you know, and again, we work for y'all. And if the members of the legislature, through the citizens of the state, say, you know what, we don't want to do that anymore, then, you know, I'm going to respect that and do. But I'm going to thoughtfully make the argument, I think, that this has been, I mean, one of the reasons that Forbes magazine, and Forbes talked about one of the top 10, John shared with me, is not just one of the top 10. That's like saying the Aggies are in the top 10 in football. See, I've gone nearly an hour here without talking about Johnny football. But he brought it to my attention. He said, not just in the top 10, the #1 state in the nation to do business. And I'll suggest to you one of the reasons we've done that is because we've created a really competitive environment. And these incentive programs, I think, are one of the tools that we get to use. I don't know if I talked to the rest of it.
It's an issue I'm sure you've had to address many times. In fact, there were some bills in the legislation last session. Since the federal government refuses to secure our border, what are you willing to do to make Texas less inviting to illegal aliens? Why can't Texas stop employing, giving free medical care and free education to illegal aliens?
Federal law requires that if someone shows up at our emergency room, they have to be given health care. So the idea that somehow or another we're going to, you know, I know where we end up here. We end up in a huge lawsuit with the federal government, and unfortunately, we probably lose that lawsuit because there is clear federal direction. And you know, I get it. I understand it. These are all symptoms. All of these things are symptoms. The healthcare side of it, the education side of it, the cost of having individuals in this state who are here illegally are symptoms of a problem that if we don't address it first, all these other ones are never going to go away. And that is to secure this border with Mexico. And it can be done. I mean, we know it can be done. We have invested over $400 million of your tax dollars with surge operations along the border with Mexico. But we have a federal government who has failed in their responsibility. I have begged, not just this administration, but administrations before, to come and engage in truly securing the border. Because if up in and when that happens, then you can start having a conversation about how to deal with the health care cost, with the education cost, with immigration. But none of those will be addressed until the federal government makes the concerted effort to put the boots on the ground, to build the strategic fencing, to put the aviation assets in the air to secure the border. And until we do that, we are chasing our tail, so to speak. I mean, you know, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we can address these issues around the periphery. And you know, we can do some things, but until the federal government really responds, until we have an administration that will stand up and say we are going to secure the border, and there are ways to do that, and then clearly strong punishments when you are in this country, and we will deport you. When that occurs, then you will get to the bottom of these issues.
Kind of ties us into the 10th Amendment and the various departments and agencies from the federal government that many would argue successfully are unconstitutional. The question is, what can the state legislature... What can the state legislature... This is blasphemy. What can the state legislature do to stop the federal government's interference with state rights, interference from the EPA, Department of Education, and Department of Energy?
Having some fun with you, Mike. At my expense. Listen, I think we all know that, you know, again, federal government spending is out of control. Everyone who was running for the presidency had a laundry list of agencies that they would either, you know, make substantially smaller or eliminate. And I mean, why do we have a Department of Education at the federal government? I mean, that is a legitimate conversation that happens. If you truly believe in local control, then leave that money in the states that goes to fund that agency, and allow the state legislators and in turn the local school boards decide how best to educate their children. I can promise you the monies will be spent better. You know, I don't want to go through the laundry list here of agencies that the federal government that have, you know, cropped up, and a Department of Energy that I'm pretty sure has not created 1 barrel of oil or 1 MCF of gas. And we have the potential in this country, and not just in Texas, but maybe in places that, because of the technology that we have available today, to find sources of energy that no one realized was there. You were 10 years ago, we were at peak oil, and people said it's over. We have found all the fossil fuels, and that graph is going down, and it will continue to go down. So whatever we're going to fuel the world with, we better start coming up with, because we're done. And then, thank God for George Mitchell, the man who did not believe all the naysayers and continued to push forward with hydraulic fracturing, and those that developed the horizontal drilling techniques that we have today, and the great energy boom that we have potential in front of us in the country, whether it's the Marcellus Shale up in Pennsylvania and southern New York, or whether it's the Bakken, and again, in places we may not know about, to allow for millions of jobs to be created. And, you know, again, I hope the President sees the wisdom of allowing Americans not to be held hostage by countries that don't care for us.
Amen.
By finding and using the North American energy. Western hemispheric energy is really a better concept from the standpoint of Canada, the United States, Mexico, and all the way down into South America. A Western hemispheric energy plan that truly puts millions of Americans to work and make this country independent of any sources. And we can do that. I mean, this is not a pipe dream. We truly have the potential to do that. The XL pipeline, bringing the Canadian tar sands in and refining those, and then the shale gas and the oil that can be developed. I mean, the potential is magnificent, and the future of this country could be so bright from an economic standpoint. But we have to have an administration that truly understands that it can be done safely, environmentally sound, and economically with great positive impact on this country.
We've heard from all our representatives tonight that we're going to be working very hard to implement a very conservative agenda in the 83rd session. What can you do to facilitate and assist us, or assist them, in ensuring that conservative laws, conservative bills make it through committee and into an actual vote?
I think somewhere around the end of January, we will have the State Address, and on that day, you know, my door's open to these legislatures. Bill and Kelly have worked with us through the years, and Stephanie as well, just not as a state rep, but whatever your pieces of legislation are, our you know, Kenny Armbrister and our policy shop is ready, willing, and able to help you draft legislation, to get it ready, to share with you, you know, what hurdles you may have, or what the historic nature of your piece of legislation has had through the years, and here's how you tweak it or what have you. So, I mean, we really do have a team concept, and so, you know, what I'm going to tell you is that, and most of you already know this, and have been down for orientation and met our staff and ready to go to work. But the key is we really all understand the principle of how representative government works, and we work for you. I mean, I get that, they get that, the senators get that, and I will suggest to you, as I said earlier, we're going to have the most conservative legislature in the 28 years that I have served in Austin, Texas. So I don't know, was it Matt, was it you? No, it was you who was talking about vetoing your bills. I can promise you how to not let that happen. Don't introduce any bad bills. It's the Aggie principle. Yes.
All right, I saved the best question for last. Will you run for president in 2016?
One of the most inspiring, interesting, difficult, trying experiences of my life was running for the presidency, and it was and still is a burning desire in my heart to see this country led by a God-fearing, conservative patriot who reflects what the values that I think most people in the state of Texas have from a little right-of-center perspective. And it was an extraordinary experience. I mean, one that I wouldn't trade, and looking back on it and knowing even, unsuccessfully, but I would do it again. Now, I will tell you, I learned some really good things. If you're going to run for the presidency of the United States, I suggest you get in pretty early. Parachuting in August is we probably could have won, but everything had to be done perfectly, and I'm pretty sure we didn't do everything. And the other one is, if you're going to have major back surgery, I would suggest you might not do it within 6 weeks of running for the presidency, that you might not perform quite at the height of your ability. But with all that said, we have the most important focus that I have and these members have starting here in about 22 days with the Texas legislative session starting. And I'll make a number of decisions about my future in June, July period of time, whenever we get through, whenever that is. And I know everyone will be all nervous about what that means. Is he already thinking about a special session? Not. That's not to say we can't have one. But the presidency in 2016 is a pretty good piece down the road. But with that said, I think it is important for all of us to really focus on this legislative session. It's really the most important thing that we do for this country is to make sure we continue to keep Texas as this place where people know that freedom is still very valuable, that you can come here and risk your capital, and then you have a better chance in Texas than anywhere else in the world to have a return on that investment. I mean, it is a powerful notion all across this country about what these legislators, the men and women who have served, and Stephanie, although you haven't been a member of the legislature, you've been serving. All of you have been. You've been expressing your will, and what we have done in this state is powerful. I'm telling you, the idea that 500 million people were watching television on the 17th of November of a Formula One race in Austin, Texas, and people around the world were hearing about Texas. They were hearing positive stories about this state. I mean, I want to share with you as I wrap up here one story, and you all were at the epicenter of this in 2001. And it's about economic development and what we learned. Boeing sent out the missive that they were going to relocate their corporate headquarters from somewhere, from the Seattle, Tacoma area, to either Chicago or Dallas-Fort Worth. And this was in the spring of '01. I'd been governor maybe 6 months, and we were all excited that we were going to get the opportunity. And we came up here and we started working with the economic development groups. And what we found, they picked Chicago. And this long story short, they picked Chicago. But what we found was we weren't really very good at economic development at the state. At the local level, they were better than we were. But we went back and said, okay, how are we going to become more competitive so that we don't lose another Boeing headquarters to Chicago or wherever? And we went back and we looked at taxes. We looked at regulatory. We passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in 2003. We also compressed our economic development department and trusteed it in the governor's office, where it was very nimble, and the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker had we created the enterprise fund. We made Texas substantially more competitive through that process of getting defeated. Now, one interesting story. 6-8 months after they chose Chicago, we heard through a fairly well-placed source from the Boeing Corporation that one of the reasons they chose Chicago over Dallas-Fort Worth was because the spouses of the decision makers had some concerns that the cultural arts would not be as expansive here as they were in Chicago. Now, I'm not going to argue whether in 2001 that is true or not. But here's why I tell people. Matter of fact, I told this same exact story to a number of corporate decision makers over the last 4 days in California. Fort Worth, over the last decade, built a new museum of modern art. They built one of the finest symphony halls in the world. Dallas finished 2 performing arts facilities in that period of time, the Myerson, the AT&T. The Perot's are just finishing a world-class science museum. The Nasher Sculpture Gardens relocated to Dallas. American Film Institute moved out of California to Dallas. Austin, Texas, a little government university town. They built a new museum of modern art. They built a Long Center of Performing Arts. San Antonio is building a new performing arts facility. Tonight in Houston, Texas, there are more theater seats available there than any other city in America outside of New York City. That's happened in a decade. And it's happened in a decade, I will suggest to you, because these members of the legislature, they understood that if you will keep the taxes low, if you'll keep a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable, if you'll put a legal system in place that doesn't allow for oversuing, and you will continue to focus on having a skilled workforce, that entrepreneurs, job creators, whatever you want to call them, get to keep more of what they work for, and they will make the right decisions. They will make the right decisions about where to expend that money, and that's exactly what happened in Fort Worth with the Basses and the Myerson, the AT&T. The private sector made the right decisions. Now let me tell you the Paul Harvey rest of that story. About a year and a half ago, I had the great privilege to go on the United States carrier, the USS Reagan. And I was observing their operations on the flight deck, and a carrier onboard delivery aircraft landed, and a group of distinguished visitors got off. I recognized one of the individuals getting off. He was the former chairman of Boeing, Bill Condit. And I went over after they had cleared the deck and just introduced myself to him, and I told him substantially shorter than what I have you here this evening, that story about the corporate decision makers' spouses being very influential in that decision about going to Chicago. He got a big smile on his face. And he said, there is more truth to that than you even know. And I said, well, I just want to share that with you. I said, by the way, Mr. Condit, where are you living now? Frisco, Texas.